A lot of fighting series look intense, but they are missing the core to what makes it come alive. The modern battle genre doesn't feel physical, dangerous, nor actually violent. And it's not just an animation or budget problem, it's a philosophy problem. Most modern battle series were built to impress, not to hurt. And the longer that's been the standard, the harder it becomes to find something that actually feels like combat. Garouden is one of the only series I've seen that actually understands what's been missing. And once you see how it does combat differently, you won't be able to unsee it in everything else. A lot of the modern fighting genre is so focused on looking cool that it sacrifices the very thing a fight needs: stakes and tension. And if you've been watching anime long enough, you already know the feeling. A fight breaks out, the animation goes crazy, and technically everything's impressive, but nothing quite lands. And it's not me bashing any shows, it's the genre itself, because when a fight loses its physical truth, it also loses its tension. And when that happens, the violence becomes easier to admire than something to believe in. Asushi Hikaria, the director of the Garouden anime, said it best.
例えばアニメでこうキャラクターが戦ってる時にその最後のフィニッシュとかだったらバコンってできるんですけど、途中の戦ってるとことかなんか意味のないパンチとかキックをあんまり出したくないなと思って。
And that's a huge point because most directors think about the finish, but Asushi was protecting every punch in between. If the exchanges between big moments feel empty, the whole fight starts to feel fake no matter how hard the final blow hits. Nowadays, modern battle series treat fights like performances instead of real struggle. They prioritize hype and speed that makes it look almost cartoony. But when you read or watch Garouden, the combat actually shows the fight step by step, with realistic martial arts you could actually learn from. A good example is from the 2024 Netflix anime series Garouden, which displays vast amounts of combat that almost feels fluid to watch. The anime was choreographed by the movement of real fighters. Official material says the anime captured real martial arts to make every punch and every kick feel realistic. This matters a ton because Garouden's movement vocabulary is built from real combat systems. Black belt Hideyoshi Tsuruya said it himself before the making of Garouden.
その話いただいた時に、すごいなと思って、まさかうちのジムが関われるなんてと思って、これを待ち望んでいる格闘技ファンはたくさんいたなとは思ってます。はい、意外とこう小説だったり漫画ってかなりかけ離れたものが多いと思うんですけども、意外とガローデンは実践に近いなっていうのはいつも感じて見てます。
And real practitioners could actually see the combat on screen. BJJ coach Misayoshi Hayakawa noted that the anime used modern techniques, not just classic martial posing. That's a massive point in Garouden's favor because the action is legible enough that real fighters can identify what kind of movement they are looking at. The best representation of this is the Juzo Fujimaki versus Himekawa fight. Juzo's Takamiya style already makes the fight look brutal in the anime, but in the manga, the same fight feels even harsher, as Himekawa bites off his own tongue just to keep himself from getting knocked out from the technique itself. Garouden even explains the trade-offs inside these fights, like why a guard is broken, what's it protecting, and the kind of pain a fighter is choosing to absorb. This series puts belt to ass when it comes to showing combat with real stakes rather than exaggerated fantasy. And once you actually follow the exchange, the next thing that hits hard is the damage. Garouden makes every blow feel like it should cost something. A good example is it shows teeth breaking, bloody noses, and kicks flying across the face, leaving consequences that should have easily been irreversible. And the craziest part, the more this fight went on, the more dangerous it became because the wolf that was inside of Tanba. And even though this was a martial arts match with rules, it was almost close to a death match because of how raw and technical this fight had going for it. In Garouden, a brutal fight doesn't reset at the bell. That's why this fight in particular hits harder than a lot of battle manga. The damage isn't some decoration on the page, it has aftermath. And that's still Garouden with rules. But the second it leaves that setting, the violence gets even uglier. The best example was when Tanba got jumped by a group of gangsters. At first, they caught him off guard and beat the living shit out of him. But little did they know the brutal nature of Tanba's violent rage. You see, Tanba isn't your ordinary protagonist. He's neither good nor evil. Instead, he's a person who loves the thrill of a blood-boiling street fight. Because there are no rules, no holds bar, and only fights to the death. So these hired gangsters made a huge mistake and learned firsthand on why he's the king of street fighting. And that sweet sense of violence gets even nastier when you compare it to an actual sport. Regulated fighting has to ban things like headbutts, eye gouging, biting, throat strikes, and groin attacks just to remain a sport. Former UFC fighter Kasunori Kikuno even pointed out that many of those fouls are banned precisely because they are so effective. That's why Garouden's brutal at its core. It brings back the uglier parts of fighting that sport removes. And once this fight got really going, it quickly turned into a nightmare. It had face-ripping, biting, and knee-breaking moments that no one was ever gonna walk away from. Even the environment changes how real the violence feels. And to better represent of how brutal this stuff can be, Masakazu Imanari said he would not want to use his Imanari roll on the hard ground because it becomes dangerous outside of mat conditions. That's something a lot of fighting series ignore, but Garouden doesn't. Hard ground, bad angles, illegal targets, and ugly openings all make the violence feel more survival-driven than performative. And Garouden doesn't romanticize shit. That's the real difference. Most battle series wants violence to look clean enough to admire. Garouden wants violence to look ugly enough to respect. It's ugly, physical, and mentally taxing in ways most fighting series fail to portray. And the fight between Tanba and Tatsumi's gangsters was where I felt the manga was revealing its true colors. And that's exactly why Garouden fights leave a stronger impression. Through Tanba, the manga shows what a life built around fighting can turn someone into. Bakuyomi Mikura doesn't frame Tanba as some clean hero of violence. He's proof of how ugly and all-consuming fighting can be once it pulls you away from the traditional ideals of martial arts. Honor, none of that exists in Tanba's presence, at least not later in the series. So much so that it starts to feel like the author is relaying a message to his readers, that if you really devote yourself to true fighting in its rawest form, you may become stronger, but you also become less human. That's what makes this story so fucking raw at its core. A lot of fighting series are really cool with amazing animation, but in most modern sakuga or even moments in battle, I see the same thing recurring. They don't hit as hard because they put speed and height before accuracy. And what's worse is that the human brutality of a fight gets softened or lost. Characters recover too easily from heavy hits, and techniques are exaggerated instead of grounded. That's the real difference. Garouden doesn't strip violence down to hype. It brings back the uglier parts of fighting that sports and spectacle usually hides. That's why Garouden stuck with me, because it feels less like a performance and more like combat. And if Garouden's your type of series, check out my playlist on mangas that hit different. You won't be disappointed. Ja mata.